everybody, Prepper003 here today with another SHTF scenario video for you. And this one is going to be something I know that a lot of us have talked about, a lot of us think about on a regular basis, and that is going to be civil unrest. And when it comes to civil unrest, there's a lot of different types of civil unrest. Now the first one is going to be localized strikes and protests. Now when it comes to strikes and protests, a lot of them can either be very peaceful, just trying to develop an idea, or to express their own point of view, if you will. Then there are times where, more and more recently, if you will, where these protests have become very filled with anger, filled with hate and violence. And they start to lash out at other people, very innocent people, and sometimes even their own people, we've seen. So right now, when it comes down to it, is that these protests and these strikes can develop into next stages of these levels and different types of civil unrest. And next one, one of the main ones in civil unrest, is going to be riots. Now, what is the difference between a protest and a riot? Well, the biggest thing is that protests mainly develop and turn into riots because of mob rule. And what a lot of us have to realize is that all the individual members may not be very violent or very hateful in essence, but what happens is there's a good amount of people inside of that group that start becoming more and more aggressive, more and more agitated, and start lashing out more and more, and that causes more people in that group to lash out until the entire group is lashing out and being violent all at once. And that's how riots develop. And what happens is with that mob mentality, everybody else starts to get that aura, if you will, and they start seeing everybody around them acting a certain way, and then they start to act out themselves and mimicking that way, almost as if a monkey see, monkey do kind of thing. It's kind of stupid to think about how easily us humans are influenced by things just in our immediately surrounding areas, but it does happen. So that's one of the things that you just have to realize is that if there is a crowd that's a protest and it's starting to get violent, it can escalate very quickly and very, very aggressively, depending on the type of situation, what's going on. Now, right now, I'm not going to develop or talk into too much of the reasons that protests happen or riots happen and things like that, because it can be religious, violent, or, well, I'm not going to go off on that tangent, but there can be a lot of different things just in politics alone that can cause people to protest and riot. But now the next thing is going to be riots. Now the thing is with both with protests and with riots is that they can be very localized. Sure, there can be good protests and riots in individual cities at any given time, but they're not going to encompass the entire nation at any given time. And what's going to happen with that is if these localized riots start to keep happening and developing continually into these cities and start to branch out into that more urban and rural areas, which is very unlikely, you can have rebellions. The best example that I can think of this is take a look what happened in 2013 and 2014 with the overthrow of the Ukraine government. That was something that happened over a very short period of time, if you will. They had a very almost essential buildup, but then it just tipped over and just the violence, just the protesters started lashing out at the police started lashing out at the protesters, and it literally became a siege on Kiev, and then that ended up splitting the entire nation, developing into civil war, which in of itself is another type of civil unrest as a subcategory for civil war. But right now, those are very large-scale, nationwide events that affect the entire nation, all the people inside of it. It's not something that's just affecting a couple of cities or maybe just one small community. It's something that's affecting the entire nation, the entire economy, and those type of things can actually cause a domino effect. It can cause financial collapse, can cause economic collapse, can cause a lot of different types of things that can go on. Like I mentioned with civil war being a whole subcategory unto itself, of being a delve off into civil unrest and something that can be caused by civil unrest. So what can we do to prepare for civil unrest? Well, the biggest thing is be aware of your surroundings, be aware of what's going on. So for example, if you know you're going to, and I'm just going to throw out a city that's local to me in size, is going to be Madison. So if I'm going to drive a couple hours down to Madison and I take a look and see that there's been a lot of protests going on, I'm going to kind of see if I truly need to go to Madison. If I don't essentially need to, I'll just avoid the entire situation altogether. Now, if you're already in that city and in that situation, for example, you take a left turn down a block and you see a couple blocks down, there's a group of protesters protesting straight across the road. For me, I would try to find a way to maybe go a different way, try to completely avoid the situation, because the best thing that we can do is just avoid it and avoid the area and avoid the situation that's going on. Because the last thing you want to do is get yourself in the middle of a riot or in the middle of some type of civil unrest. And the thing is I know that a lot of different types of preppers are also political. So they go out and protest themselves against certain type of issues. Well, what can happen is you can have a political clash, as we've seen numerous times, where two different political parties are out in the streets actually fighting. And those things can happen at the flip of a coin. So right now, it just has to realize that, try to avoid those type of situations, avoid that type of area, and just avoidance is one of the key things that I can recommend for you. The next thing is to stay cautious. Just to read your local newspapers, read your local media, or watch your local TV if you can, or just read up on things that are going around locally around you, because even if you live in a rural area, things can still delve off into very violent political or civil unrest. So just realize that. Just try to be cautious, be aware of what's going on in your surroundings. And we've seen it just at a drop of a hat, to where people were just shopping perfectly fine at a local Walmart, and all of a sudden a just mass group of teens just rushed in there and just ransacked the place. So you just have to, just something to stay cautious. If you see a huge group of people running into Walmart and you're inside of it, try to get as far away from the area. Try to game plan the emergency exits. Try to just be aware of everything that's going on, which is why one of the things that you can do is, whenever you go into a place, look and realize where the emergency exits are, where your points of entry are, and things that are kind of like that, if you will, just as an example. The next thing is going to always give yourself a way out. As I mentioned before, is with those emergency exits and just looking around your area, that's just one thing that you can do to give yourself a way out. Another example would be if you're in a almost a traffic stop and there's a couple of cars ahead of you, try to give yourself a full car space ahead of between you and the vehicle in front of you. That way, if something happens, you're not boxed into a certain area. You have a little bit of room to give yourself momentum to maybe go forward, go back, jump a curb to get out of there. Because the last thing you want to do is be boxed in and have a riot happen right there around you. Because as we've seen, a lot of those people target vehicles. We've seen them throw Molotov cocktails on top of vehicles, throw bricks, drag people out of their vehicle, as we saw in the Rodney King riots, and just beat them in the head with a brick. And that's another thing. Especially if you're out on the road, one of the things I can definitely recommend is to always have a get-home bag. Have something that has a good amount of supplies, to where if you have to be on foot, you got a good 24 hours worth of supplies in your get-home bag. Another thing is if you are out and about and you do know that you have to be out. For example, you have to go to work. There's no calling in or anything like that, and there's a likelihood of civil unrest in your area. Maybe keep a gas mask inside of your vehicle, because as we've seen, police do deploy CS gas against these protesters, and the last thing you want to do is be trying to get home on foot because the roads are inaccessible, and all of a sudden you're being hit with CS gas. So having a gas mask is something that can be very beneficial to you. The only thing is you want to make sure you have the right rated gas mask. Not all gas masks are universal, so just look into the specs of your gas mask and what it's capable of accepting. The last thing is if you are in an urban area and there is a chance of civil unrest, have some type of home defense firearm on you, something that's very compact, something that's easily to be able to be moved throughout rooms. My personal choice is a nice pistol caliber carbine, or a subgun, if you will. My wife is very good at shooting these. I am very easily able to move throughout rooms, move in and out of doorways with this as well. And the nice thing about this is whenever I do get this up onto my cheek weld right here, I'm not over presenting that barrel. So if I come around a corner or something like that, there's very little extra space here for them to grab a hold of that firearm and try to maintain the ability from that firearm from me. So as you would with just an example with a shotgun right here, as you see, there's almost an extra 2 feet of length on this shotgun here from me. So if something does happen, and I come around the corner and there's somebody that had broken inside of my house or something like that, and in those type of situations, law enforcement may be hours away from me because they're already dealing with these violent protesters. So unless you have a panic room or something like that you're able to hold up into, you might have to go out and investigate what's going on or maybe clear your own house. So what could happen is you come across a sharp corner or something like that, you don't properly pie it, or you don't have the room to pie the corner as best you can. They come across and now you've lost full control of that firearm because you're now fighting them for the firearm. As with something that's nice and compact like this right here, you have a lot more points of control on this firearm. You're able to quickly move it and be able to manipulate it and move yourself. So that's why I recommend having some sort of pistol caliber carbine or SBR, if you will. Another good option is a pistol. That's something that you can do on you as well. They're very maneuverable. They're very compact. You can have them on you at all times. So that's another good option, and that's something I would definitely recommend on any scenario for a prepper, is to have some type of concealed carry. I know that there are states and there are even countries where you cannot have a concealed weapon on you. So I would just say the best luck to you in that type of situation. Just try to think outside the box. Try to give yourself as many different types of options as you will. For example, maybe breaking a chair leg off to give yourself a blunt object. The best option in that type of scenario is just to avoid a conflict altogether if you don't have to. So that's just my best option to you. So I really want to hear your guys' options on civil unrest and some things that you can do to prepare for it, different types of civil unrest that you guys can think of, and what do you guys think about as civil unrest being a SHTF scenario. Now I know a lot of it for the most part is very short term, but as we've seen in Ukraine, it can become a very long term situation. So like I said, I want to hear what you guys think, and I really want to hear back from you. So thank you, and remember, those that prepare for today survive tomorrow. Have a great day. Prepper 003 out.